All right. Hello and welcome. Today we're going to look at how to build a stateless backend with JWT, so JSON Web Token authentication, in the RESTful API that we're going to build from scratch with, or almost from scratch, with Neon 3. So what are we going to do first? Let's talk about requirements. So what you will need is, well, preferably a Git client. I mean, that's not super important at this point, but you want that. And then some form of server you can basically run this on. I personally run SAM for Windows, but you have different possibilities. But we do want to have let's have an Apache set up for now. That makes things easier. I have shipped with SAMP is a MariaDB, which is basically a MySQL. And I will also require Node installed that ships with Node Package Manager, so npm. You want that as well, and Composer, which is the package manager for PHP, and those are all things you want to have. Should you not have those installed, please stop this video and take care of it right now, and then we're gonna jump in. So I assume in this case that you have installed the Neon 3 CLI via the Node Package Manager, and actually to be sure that I have it, let me quickly do that myself. Neon 3, npm install Neon 3 CLI. Oh, and make sure that was yep, thought so. Make sure that you install that globally. As otherwise you have problems using it in different contexts. All right, so this is where we're at. As you can see, I'm using PHP Storm, but feel free whatever you want to use. It's just easier. And let me see if my database, let me quickly set that up. So I prepared a, let me look at this quickly. I called it DB app. Okay, sorry. So user's root, password is hidden, and the database is DB app. Got it. Quickly test this. All right. So the database should be completely empty. Let's actually take care of this quickly. That's all we need. It's completely empty at this point, and so is my project. So as you can see, for convenience, I directly have this project in htdocs, so it's an in-place setup, and that's basically where it's the easiest to go ahead. So I should have Neon 3 now. Let's make sure that that's the case. So yep, that looks good. And then since I probably did have something that was, might as well ignore that for now. Let me just see something. Yep, I thought so. Okay, everything fine. Then let's start with a new application. So Neon 3, new app, and in that case, what did I call this application? Stateless. Sure. Let's do that. It's going to take a while depending on your machine and internet connection. There we go. So we should now have, yep, everything we want. It kind of reminds me that I probably want to run an npm install right now, which I probably want. Actually, let's ignore that for now. So what do we have here? As you can see, this is the actual URL of my localhost, stateless. That's what I called it. So if I refresh this now, then I can see it is now running. Let's just verify that we're in the right thing. So by default, the default controller is demo, which in my different components I can see is right here. So let's go into the view and basically say hello world. As simple as that. And then refresh. Oh, I see Firefox doesn't go for that shortcut. All right, and then I see hello world. Perfect. So, but today we're not so much concerned about like any kind of views. What we want to do is we want to get a stateless API. So the first thing that by the way, what I'm gonna use is Postman. That's something that helps you to develop APIs and or test and do connections of all sorts. So there are a couple of things I need. The first thing I want to do is I want to create a couple of endpoints. So how do I do this with Neon 3? It's pretty simple. Oops. Going down to my console again, and you can do that with the command line of Windows. It really doesn't matter. Neon 3, and then we say new component, and well, let's create a couple of them actually. The first one we want to do is profile, and it's going to be an API endpoint using demo. Sure, why not? Which actually, now that I think of it, let's not do that. Let's say Neon 3 new frame API or test API. Okay, so a frame is basically something that loads a couple of project-specific well setup and so on. We will need that for like database connectivity and so on. So I made the mistake now of having the profile using the frame demo, which I don't want. I actually want to have instead. I want to have the test API. I'm going to do that here as well. And then a get profile. That's probably what we're going to end up. And yeah, let's leave both of those in here. So just to make you aware of what this is doing, let's just say return. Actually, let's return the input itself. Let's return the input itself, and then switch over here. Go to our Postman and say profile. So this will probably tell us now that okay, because this is wrong. Stateless. Yeah, request is empty. So let's just add something here. Some value. And we can see I actually get a result. Now at this point, this is more or less a public endpoint, right? If we would deploy it. So that is what we're going to look at today. How authentication and all that kind of stuff works. So there are a couple of things we will need. First of all, we want to fill out our database with a user model. Otherwise, we will have problems verifying anything. So let me start by pulling in something. So I'm going to say Neon 3 add, and what I'm going to add is let me think if I can remember that. Neon 3 model user, and this lives at, it's not a package, that's why. github.com/my name and then Neon 3 user model dot git. Okay, let's hope. Oops, I have a typo in here. Neon. Okay. Wait. There we go. Oh yeah, right. We also have to tell what we want to do. So we want to say add model, and then the model name. Okay. So let's give it a second, and then it should have, come on. It's Monday morning. There we go. All right, a couple of dependencies that we have here. So in our model folder, we should now have user, which you can see consists of a composer JSON and README, and this is the actual user model. So here we can see how that is set up. So what we have here is three very basic functions. One is by ID, one is find, and one is register. And in our migrate JSON, it describes how we need to set up our database. So it's a pretty simple system, right? You can see those are the tables, and then there are the columns, and they're defined in the specific way. So I need to put that format into my database, which I can simply automate and to say Neon 3 migrate models up. I have no credentials, so it's localhost, and I call this db app, and use this root port, yep, and yep, no password, perfect. Okay, let's verify that quickly. Yep, and we can see we now have that in here. So a user email should have an ID, user ID email, and so on. Yep, looks very good. Great. So now we need to get some data into this database. So what we want to do at this point is to say we probably need an endpoint to register. So I'm going to say neon3 new component, and we're going to call it register. It's going to be an API endpoint, and we're going to take the test API. All right, so let's do that. Let's actually close the frame and the models and all of this, and go to register. So there will be no get call whatsoever, and there will be a register. So let us think of what we need to ensure. We need to make sure that user is unique, right? We need to make sure that email, yeah, I mean, let's just assume that we do not have to validate formats at this point. So that's the only thing we probably want to do. So we would now want to use the model. So there's a user model. This is something my IDE does, by the way, but you can basically use the complete namespace if you want to, or write the use up here. I mean, that's something I hope you're already familiar with. So we're gonna find, and we're basically gonna say, all right, so if the passing, and this is basically, let's rename this to register array. I'm gonna call this new user. Okay, so now we're basically gonna say, all right, find, oops, we wanna first see that the email is unique, right? So email new user email, and that's gonna be exists. Existing user. Okay, so what we do need to make sure, though, if we receive that call, is that stuff like email and password is actually set. So that's something that we want to do. And then we're simply going to say if not is set new user email, or not is set new user password. let's throw the people out. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to throw an exception. New route exception. Missing missing values. Okay, so what does this do? This basically, and by the way, again, same thing happened here. This will interfere with the flow of the program and basically will stop execution immediately and return. So if we go back to our API, which by the way you can again see that so after the endpoint it's ap.v1 when you start a new application. You can change that, but we're gonna go into that at some other point. And I probably am gonna just try this out now to say, instead of that, we're gonna go register, and instead of get, we're gonna go to post. Okay, so I get the error missing values, and as you can see, I get a 304 forbidden, which is probably not the best code to send in this case, but that's maybe like this. So this is basically, yes, the first thing we want to do in order to ensure that the values that we need are there. So, and then at the next point we're going to say, all right, so does this user exist? And let's just assume there are two possibilities now. Either this can be filled or this cannot be filled. So you can do the same thing here. I'm going to write this a little bit boringly, but just to make it easy. Just going to say if not empty existing user, then throw new route exception already registered, and then here we go. Okay, so we have basically ensured that our users are only users that we want. So let's now say this is a valid call to register. Then we want to start to fill in the database. So the database connection is something that we need a particular app for. So most Neon installations ships with them. Let me quickly verify if the apps, yep, so we already have a database app. However, we don't have any kind of database connection. So the test API frame is probably what we're going to look at this point. So let's say, and since it's an API, I'm not going to bother with anything else but the absolute basics. So nothing that would actually do rendering. So let's do a function construct and basically say, when I'm done with you, you can do your regular stuff. And here I'm going to first of all set up my database connectivity. So I'm going to say yep, and set environment. So what do I want to set here? So the first thing I want to do is, like, I want to make sure that the app understands that we're not auto incrementing anything here. We're using unique IDs. So that's something I want to tell the database. It helps me a lot with things we're going to look into later. And then we need basically a name, and the name is going to be db app. So the rest defaults for us. So like on our local host, like the username would be root, there would be no password, stuff like that. So I don't really need to take any actions here. So I'm going to leave it like this. And that should be everything I need. So from now on, I can simply use it and say, okay, so if that's the case, let's create a user. And we already have a register in our model, if you remember. Let's look at that. So it takes an email and a password, and yep, that's all we need. Okay, great. So, and does it return the user? Of course it does. Okay. So what we want to do is basically say user model register, and then we're going to say new user email and new user password. And that is registered user. And let's return something and say registration successful. So what we want to do naturally normally in between here, and this is something that's honestly one of those English words. What we normally want to do here is at this point, and we're probably going to see that in the register. So the user email has a confirm code that we want to verify, and basically set this user as not verified until the email was clicked and so on. We're going to jump over this for now. Just assume that whenever you register, you're going to be fine. So that is basically, yes, the state of where we're at. So let's jump and actually register ourselves, shall we? So we need, well, let's first of all, this shouldn't have changed, right? All right, so instead we're going to have email equals sum@email.com, and we're going to have a password that's going to be super secure. I'm going to be 123456. All right, let's send that. Yep, got my 200 message, and registration is successful in the body. Okay, that is good, which basically means if I look into my database, I can now find there is a user, which probably this is better to see with the binary values here. So here's my email address, now registered. Okay, so that is good. So how does this help us with basically getting any kind of security setup? So now we have a user, and that user is registered. So now we could basically go to profile and just look at particular things. But again, we want to verify that this is a secure connection. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install another app, and this is going to be Neon 3. No, actually not. Sorry, this is a composer package. Composer require, and then we're going to say Neon 3 / stateless. It's going to take a second. Could not find matching version. Okay. You must please def. That should be fine. I know. This was, of course, Neon 3 apps stateless. Okay. Okay, sorry, that was the phone. So now we are, done with installing the stateless app. That's great. So let's see where we would find that. So basically, that's a regular composer package. So in Neon 3 apps, we now find stateless. What does this mean? Well, that basically means that now we have the ability to use JWT. So let's basically set that up. In general, we need a secret for that. So let's go back to our frames, say test API. And so we have to define the database here. And now basically say, let's do stateless set secret. And that's going to be something that you don't want to be dynamic, or at least not, in a very rapidly paced way. So maybe change that once a day. But you can also work with expires and so on. But sometimes you should change it just for security reasons. So that's important to sign your web tokens, and please do not use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I think that's understood. So now we have set up the stateless and can basically go to the get profile and say, okay, so now stateless restrict. So we can put a particular scope in here. Let's just say user in that case. And let's see what happens if we ask our postman for the profile again. So let's switch it back to get, and instead of register, we are going to say profile. Oh, by the way, I think that was pretty clear, right? So the get or post, whatever's in front of those functions, that defines what kind of endpoint it is. So what kind of method we're using. So let's do the get, and okay, so we actually did send an authorization header over there that was in a wrong format. Okay, that happens. Let's jump back to be on topic. So we left on, all right, so the profile, so as you can see, I get the unauthorized because I'm not logged in and I'm not using authorization. So what can I do in order to achieve that is, of course, I need a login. Do I already have a login? I don't, so let's create that. Let's say neon3 new component and login, and that's going to be an API endpoint using the test API. Great. Let's do that now. Oops, here. So there will be no get in our case, and there will be a post login. So we're gonna actually steal a little bit from here, and I'm gonna say yep. So you need an email and password set. Otherwise, it's not gonna work. We're gonna call this login. No, actually, we're gonna call this credentials. Without this, I guess. And credentials email, credentials user, and then we are throwing out the that's actually correct. And then we basically are going to find the user again. So again, we can simply say, all right, are you here? Oops, where's my login? Here. Yep. And it's going to be the credentials. Okay, so we want to be careful here, right? Unauthorized. So whenever there's wrong data, the only thing I really want to answer is unauthorized. Why? Well, for a very simple reason. I don't want to give any kind of indication whether or not the email didn't exist or the password didn't match or whatever. That's going to make it a little bit harder to basically work around security, and it's not super critical, but I would recommend doing it that way. So so let's assume now that okay, we found this user, so we need to retrieve this. So this is basically found user, and that's going to be existing user 0. That's for the simple reason that this find will return an array. So if we give the full email and something was found, then we want to have the first one that we found in that case. So that is our found user. So now we basically want to retrieve the password from the database. So I don't know if you remember, but in the user model, we basically noticed that the password is encrypted with itself, right? That's important. Don't use a static salt that your server knows and so on. That's all a security implication. Either hash the password or encrypt it with itself plus a salt. You can add a salt, but it should be user based. And the simplest way in that form was to basically simply say encrypt it with itself. So let's retrieve it for now. So we want to say, oops, you don't have this yet. Yep. DB easy. And we want to say user password word. Again, just because you're not familiar with this, so the user password has a password column that we're going to want to retrieve now. So let's do that and say where user ID is. And now here comes the tricky part. Since we're using UUIDs, I want to reformat the user from a hexed version to an unhexed version, so to binary, in order to save space in the database. With the NeonDB app, I can simply do that with prepending a $sign. And then we say found user ID. Okay, it's as simple as that. And then let's actually make a quick check. This should not be necessary because I don't know why a user wouldn't have a password. But let's just be sure and say, okay, if empty password, throw this error. And so now we basically have this password. So what we want to do now is we're going to create with ops, we're going to say decrypt. So the question that we have now is basically, can the user decrypt the password 0 password with the credentials password, and is this equal to credentials password? That's our question. So here basically is authorized, right? And else, of course, we're going to say no. So if this is the case now, then we know that the user is good to go. So we should basically provide a token for him. So let's use stateless and say assign. So as the identifier, we can be lazy and say we're going to use the existing user, the found user. The found user ID, and the scope can either be an array or a string or nothing. In that case, we want to have user, and we're going to call this JWT. Okay, and we're going to return a token with the JWT. Okay, let's try it out. So that would be our complete login functionality. So if we say login and we change this to post, why not? The components route exception not found. Okay. Okay, that's something we should probably quickly include. Use, there we go. Yeah, it's gonna bitch because it's, but we should be good. Okay, so I'm not authorized. Probably my credentials are wrong. Let me quickly see which email did we use. sum@email.com. It's a big logical error. Of course, So in the registration process that made sense, but what we want to do here is to say no, of course the user must exist, otherwise we're not going to proceed further. So that is of course a problem. Still can't get in though. So let's see if we now have a password. Yep, that seems to be fine. And let's see. Oops. Let's see if same thing here. If not empty password throw. Yep, same problem here. Same problem here. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. That's what you get when you copy and paste. So let's actually duplicate this here and say, so we remember that our profile, and let's actually remove this from here and quickly make sure that the profile does not require anything. Yep, nope. This is anything here. So this still gets unauthorized. Okay, perfect. Because we're asking for this. So in your front-end application, of course, if you log in successfully and you get the token, you would basically send that in an authorized header. So let's add authorization, in that case manually, and say this is going to be bearer token, and it's going to look like this. Send the request again, and boom, I get the empty result of the profile, and which is a little bit boring. So what I probably want is I want to use the user model by ID. Let's get the decrypted JWT out again and say JWT JTI. Maybe you know what I'm quickly going to do, just so you know how this is going to look like. Let's quickly return this, just to let you know. So that's the format this actually comes out as. So as you can see, JTI, that's the identifier, JSON token identifier, and I just put the user ID directly in here. So, which basically means that I can get the user by simply inputting that here. Now let's return our profile, or basically our complete user model in that case. And boom, as you can see, we get our complete user model out, and now we're authenticated and everything works fine. I guess you can take it from there. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.